everybody, and welcome to the webinar this morning on employment equity, so specifically the changes and a practical guide to hopefully helping you put together your plan and then implementing and maintaining compliance specifically around the sector targets. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nikki Hardwick. I head up the HR department for HR Talk. I have been dealing with equity almost since inception, so since the Act came into effect in 2000, and so have worked through all the changes. All right, we've still got a couple of people joining, but if you could just give me a thumbs up to confirm that everyone can see the slides and that everyone can hear me clearly. Just a little thumbs up. All right, good stuff. Thank you. All right, there was only one. Can everyone else hear me? All right, that's Charlene. Can you hear me?
Yes, Nikki, I can.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to assume everyone else can hear me then. Okay. Alrighty. So what I would like to do is if anybody has any questions, okay, thanks very much. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to pop it in the chat. I'm going to try and make this as simple as possible, trying to give everybody, as much information as I can in quite a short time span. And I know people are still coming in. So pop your message in the chat if you have a question, and we will continue. Alrighty, okay. So in essence, what I'm going to be talking about, I'm not going to be talking about all of the changes, but more specifically around, what are the things that we are supposed to be doing as employers, designated employers. So what are we supposed to be doing regarding, these sector targets? So what is the requirement of you? I've had very many discussions over the last couple of weeks, some heated, some people very, very upset about these sector targets. I've written a couple of articles, I've put some opinion pieces on LinkedIn, just trying to explain to people, what is the expectation? What are you required to do? What happens if you don't get there? How are these changes different to what it is that we've had in the past? So everyone else is able to hear. If you're unable to hear, please log off. Charlene, if you could just pop that in the chat if they can log off and then rejoin, very often that will fix the problem. Okay. So, just in terms of, the kinds of things that we're having to do now, and I'll go through the sector targets and some of the changes, is the way that equity, in my view, that needs to be managed now is that it has to be a more proactive approach rather than reactive. And that's not to say that a lot of employers haven't been proactive in the way that they've managed things. But my sense has been that very often, you'll put your employment equity plan in place, and then what happens is at the end of the year, you kind of have a look to go, did we make it? Didn't we make it? Oh, okay, well, we didn't. Let's try better next year. Whereas the way that this is being positioned now is it's almost got to be a very proactive approach, is you need to be looking at things and going, before we even do a recruitment, before we even process anything, is what we are doing is we're having a look to see what are the numbers that we need to try and achieve. And what we're not suggesting is that, this has never ever been a case of saying you have to employ solely on the basis of color. No one is saying that you need to sell your company. Well, there might be people that are saying that, but technically that can't work anywhere. No one can force you to sell your company to anyone, actually. But what the idea behind the sector targets is, my version of it, is it's almost like you're being told that you have to lose 50 kgs in 5 years, for argument's sake. Now, if we put together a plan, and your plan is, which is what a lot of employment equity plans have been, is we expect nothing to change. We don't expect anything will happen. It's too difficult. It's too hard. And then you get to the end of your plan and well, nothing has changed. And so, you know, if we take into account, we look at the 50 kgs, we need to lose our 50 kgs. If you go to the doctor and he says, you've got to lose it, you don't have an option, that is what you have to lose. So you can't decide on 20 or 10 or whatever, you have to lose your 50 kgs. And then he says, well, tell me what you're going to do to fix that. And you say, well, I'm not going to be able to get up in the morning. I'm not going to be able to cut back on my eating. I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to do this. I expect basically the bare minimum. And then when you get to the end of it, the doctor comes back and says, well, you didn't lose anything. You say, oh, well, you know, what you need to do and what the purpose of this plan is and what these plans is to say, assuming everything goes according to plan, assuming that you do have turnover of staff, assuming that there are people available, assuming back to our 50 kgs, that you are able to get up in the morning, that your diet goes well, that nothing goes wrong, you don't have COVID, you don't have the riots, you don't have, I don't know, a whole lot of things. So assuming none of those things, what is your plan going to be? So we make a plan, you know, with the best intentions, and then we see if we can work towards that. Because if you make a plan to fail, then you will, you know, then you will fail. So when we're putting this together, very often we are planning things that we don't believe will happen, but the intention is to say we're going to. So for example, if you have a group of overrepresented people, we assume that we will lose those people. If we lose those people, then we will try and rectify the problem. But if you say we don't ever expect to lose those people, when you lose one of those people and they go somewhere else, you haven't thought about what your plan will be because you never expected to lose them in the first place. So that's kind of the intention of how you need to, or at least how I'm approaching this, is to say, assuming these things will happen, making that assumption that we will have the turnover, people will leave, there will be people who have the possible skills, all of these things taken into account. Now, if that person leaves, what am I going to do? I've already got my plan that says that I'm going to try and do that. And if I can't do that, what's my next step? Okay. So just talking very quickly into what has changed, and I assume that many of you already know these things, but obviously, excuse me, we have the sectoral targets, which I'll go through very shortly now. Now, just to be clear, that if you read the legislation and the changes, the sectoral targets are not a suggestion. It's not something that you can decide if you feel like putting in your plan. You are required to put those targets in as what you are going to achieve by 2030. So in the different spaces, and I'll go through now, that is the target that you are saying you're going to try and achieve. You cannot put in your target that if you've got 33%, that you're never going to get to that. So we're only going to put in 10%. Because if you get to the point of an audit and your sector target doesn't meet what your plan is suggesting, they're going to throw out your plan because your sector target didn't meet, or at least your written plan didn't meet the actual sector target. So it is not an option for you. You need to put in the sector targets. And as I've said, if you, and that is a choice that you can make, is that you can decide, I'm not going to do it. So yes, I'll put the numbers in because I have to do it. I'll put the numbers in, but my intention is I'm not going to say 33%, I'm going to say 10%. If they do an audit, you're probably going to be found, you know, in contravention of the Act, because it is legally binding to make that as your target. There is the other side, which says that you have justifiable reasons, which we'll talk about now, but you have to put that as your target. If you don't put it as your target, then you just need to be prepared that you probably will, you know, go up for audits. You know, there might be a fine involved because you've directly gone against what is in the legislation. It would be the same as saying, you know, we're not going to do an EA2 and we're not going to do an EA4 because we don't want to. Okay, then we've got our EE plans. So for everybody, we are all going, every single company will go from 1st of September 2025 to 31st of August 2030. Regardless of what your financial year is, regardless of what your previous plan had, this is now year 0. So we're starting on year 0. They can still audit your previous compliance in terms of meetings, etc., for the previous years, but we're now starting at year 0 from 1st of September. You are required to have your new plan signed and in place by the 1st of September because that's when it starts. So if you haven't done that already, I would suggest you get going. And so you're going to put a new plan in place that'll run September to August and obviously every year. So it'll end 31st August 26 will be year 1, 27 is year 2, and so on. We also then need to report on your annual targets. So that is something that you do in the beginning, that you put in your plan. And then every year when we do our EEA2, so this year we will do our EEA2, we will put in our current, which will be 1st of September or at least 31st of August 2025. And we will say, what are we planning on achieving by 31st of August 2026? So what are we looking at? So that is both headcount as well as percentages. So what is our plan to get to the end game? Okay. We have had some people who say we don't believe these targets are reasonable, we're not going to do it. And so our plan for year 1, 2, 3, 4 is that we expect no changes. We're not going to do anything, nothing is going to change. And then in year 5, we're going to get there. Now, the challenge with that is that if in year 5 you haven't met the targets, which a lot of people are saying is probably not going to happen, whether it does or it doesn't, it isn't really the point at this time, is that if we get to year 5 and you haven't met your target and you get audited at that point, if Department of Labor look at your plan and they go, well, hang on a second, if I look here, so you didn't meet your target, what are your justifiable reasons, which I'll get to now? Why didn't you meet the target? And they look at your plan and they say to you, but when you put your plan together, you actually stated here that you had no intention of changing anything in year 1, 2, 3, and 4. So now you want to tell me you had justifiable reasons. However, when we look at what you were planning on doing, you were planning on doing nothing for 4 years. How can you possibly have expected to change from where you were to the sector targets if your intention was to make absolutely no changes? And so I would not recommend doing it like that. I would recommend looking at where you need to, and I'll go through how we go about doing that. But where do we need to be by 2030? Where are we now? And incremental changes, again, whether or not you think it's going to happen, but what is our intention? All things being equal, what do we hope will happen? So if those people leave, who are we going to replace them with? And so we go. So if you make no plan to change and then you don't meet it, you're probably not going to, and we don't know what's going to happen in 2030. I'm making assumptions, but if it was me, that's what I would be saying. So if you make no plan to change for 4 years and then don't meet your target in year 5, well, I'm not sure that you can really, justifiably state that you tried. All right, then we've got our deviations. So when we put our annual targets, so in 2026, we would have put our targets in for this year for 26. Next year, what they will do is they will check what is our workforce profile against our target and to go where are the deviations. So if for argument's sake you said that you were going to have, and I'm not entirely sure if they're going to look at head count. So if you said you were going to have 5, do you have 5? Or are they looking at the percentages? That makes more sense to me, but I'm not sure which one they're going to be checking. But let's assume it's either or. If you have a deviation, that says that you'd planned on getting, let's say, 10% and you're actually on 8%, then you need to justify the deviation, which I'll go through the points just now. So every year you're going to be having to look at this to go, why are we different? And it could be that you have a deviation because you'd planned on 10% and you're actually on 15%. Why do we have the deviation? It's because we actually have more people than what we'd originally expected. So there was a merger or whatever it is. So you then need to justify every single year to go, why do we have what we have? Why did we not meet those targets? Okay. So I do see that there was a question, excuse me, which I will get to now. So those are the kinds of things that you will need to do. Okay. So obviously there's the compliance certificate which you will apply for afterwards, and the compliance certificate, I'm not going to go into it in great detail. If you have questions regarding the certificate, please email us afterwards. But what you're going to need to do now, if you haven't started, is you're going to need to do your workforce profile. You're going to have to compare against the current sector targets. You conduct your analysis. You're going to have your meetings with your committees and that kind of thing to go, what are we doing and where do we need to go? As I've said before, your new plan will have to run from 1st of September 2025 to 31st of August. If you have a plan, so we have some clients that have a plan that end in December 2025, that plan becomes null and void and this one becomes the new one. So you can't start a new plan, let's say from 1st of January because you had another one. The whole of South Africa now goes September to August. If you become designated in 2026, your plan will then run from 1st of September 26 to August 2030. And currently you're still required to meet the same sector targets. Okay. All right, just talking into the sector targets. So there's 18 different sectors. You then need to select which sector that you are in, and that is the sector that you are now going to be looking at. So just to be clear, every single level, so the top 4 levels, so top management, senior management, professionally qualified and skilled technical, have different percentages. So depending on what industry, you can see public administration, the expectation in top management is 50%, 54.4%. Designated groups. To be clear, because there have been some confusion, designated groups for men is African, colored, and Indian. Designated groups for female is African, colored, Indian, and white. It is not the same as BEE. We don't exclude white females when we're talking about equity. So in essence, this 40.8% here or 22.5, what they're saying is that by 2025, they want a representation in top management. The sector targets, I will send you the sector targets afterwards, but they also would have been emailed to you by Department of Labor probably about 2 or 3 months ago. So what they're suggesting over here, just to be clear, because I've had a couple of clients that have been confused, again, not the same as BEE. BEE, you exclude white females, not for equity, all females are included. African, yes, white men do form part of designated groups. They would form part of this disability at the bottom. So yes, they are part of a designated group, white males, if they are disabled. Okay. All right, so there's loads of questions coming. Let me just go to my points here. Okay, so if we look at females right here, this is saying that they would like representation in that group to be of females, 22.5%. The remaining groups over here is 15%. So what they would like in top management is in wholesale and retail, they would like 15% representation in top management of females. 25%, so it's a minimum of 25% needs to be African, colored, or Indian males. 15% African, colored, Indian, or white females. Okay. The remainder, so the rest, the 60%, because this is only 40%, you could do what you like with. So by 2030, they would like you to have 40% broken up into this of designated people in top management. And you can see in each of these levels going down here is it changes. So as the levels go down, and it changes per sector. So there are 18 different sectors. Once you select your sector, that is the sector that you are in. That is the group that you need to be in. It would tie in, I think, largely to kind of the sector that you're in. And so that is the sector that you would need to be in. Disability is a 2%, I think it's 2% of workforce. So that can be anywhere in the workforce. It doesn't really matter where it is. And then below here, we've got semi-skilled and unskilled. Now, semi-skilled and unskilled, you still have a target to reach, but that target is EAP. Now, when we look at EAP, they have updated the economically active population. You must decide at the beginning of your plan, are we looking at national or are you looking at provincial? Once you've decided, that is what you will look at for the remainder of your plan. So it's quite important that you select. So obviously, if you only KZN based or only Gauteng or whatever, you can't pick national unless you know that next year your plan is to go national, and therefore you're going to be looking at different numbers. So top management is skilled. You look at your sector targets. The bottom two levels, yes, thank you. I think this is the old numbers. It is 3% for disabilities, not 2%, but it's 3% of the total workforce. So if you have them all in unskilled, it doesn't really matter. Just also understanding that the definition of disability has changed as well. Okay, so the definition of disability now includes sensory, so it's intellectual, sensory, and physical impairments, which substantially limit your entry into or advancement in employment. But there is additional wording now, which also says that it is specific to the job that you are doing. So if, for argument's sake, I'm just going to say, let's assume, I'm asthmatic, and which I'm asthmatic, but in HR talk, there is nothing here that can prohibit me. There is no reason that my asthma is going to cause me to possibly not be taken up for a promotion. Nobody questions me when, so if I come for a job interview, being asthmatic or not being asthmatic isn't really an issue, okay, because the environment doesn't cause it to be an issue. If I am, you can find the disability definition on the EEA1. If I go to, however, let's say a construction site, and I'm an asthmatic, and it's full of dust, and I'm allergic to dust, and it causes an issue, me being asthmatic in that environment might cause an issue. And so in that environment, the employer may have to make accommodations. Maybe I have special masks, etc., etc. And so in one business environment, a disability may not be a disability. So if it does not impact your ability to get promotions, go for training, etc., or get a job or retain your job, etc., it isn't necessarily a disability. Whereas in another organization, it might be completely different. So, we've had debates regarding, in top management, if I'm overrepresented in a particular group, can we not have those people now have, I don't know, disabilities? My question would be at that point is, what has their disability, if they do have one, because they now become designated, if they had a disability, if they're sitting in a director position, how has that disability limited their ability to progress in the organization? So is it then a disability? No, it's probably not. So just be careful of doing that. You don't need to get a doctor's note. You don't need to do any of those things. You will for BEE, but this is based on a declaration that the person would make on the EEA1. Okay. So just going back a second, so we've developed a tool which I'm going to go through. I was going to do a demo, but I've decided not to. So I'll just show you some of the things that I'm recommending that you do when you put together your plan. We will send you a link afterwards where you can choose to use it or not. But in essence, what you would do is you would go in, as I've said, you go in, you select your sector. So these are the sectors which already align to your sector targets, which you would see. You would need to select your province, which would either be national, KZN, and each of those would be different. Depending on which province you are in, and then you would move forward to the next section. Okay, so what you now have is you have a snapshot of your employees. So you would then go and put in how many employees you have currently. So when you're looking at your current snapshot, I would try and take the most recent one. So if you've got the 31st of July or, maybe May, so try and take one of those snapshots, making sure that you've got your occupational levels correct, making sure that you know that your information is accurate as it stands. So what you need to do is you do your current snapshot in which you've got your African, colored, Indian, white, and then obviously foreign nationals. Just remembering that if you have South African Chinese people, so people who are, South African citizens, there was that case many years ago in which they will fit underneath here because they can't fit under white, otherwise the men specifically are non-designated group. So Chinese people, if they're South African, would fit under colored. Okay. All right, so you do your snapshot, and then what you start to do, and I would suggest, is that you start to look at some sort of projection. It is really difficult to understand what are we going to do in 5 years, and this is a projection. So you could do your turnover and your projection. Your projection could be we don't expect to grow at all, but we do expect that we will have some turnover of staff. And so what you can start to do is to say we want to do an average projection of 105% retention and a 9% turnover. And what we then start to do is to go, okay, well, we have 60 staff now. We think we're going to have 76. So it becomes, so you can look at your projection going backwards. Well, look at what has happened in the last 5 years, and you can easily try and work out what it is that you're going to do. What this then does is it says, assuming you agree with it, you can use different numbers, you can put in whatever you like, is it now starts to say, well, how are we expecting to grow year on year? Okay, so as opposed to, so that's assuming you're going to grow. If you're expecting to decrease, then you can obviously do different numbers as well, but it starts to then go, what do we think is going to happen? So it becomes a little bit more scientific, as opposed to us just going, no, we're just going to be exactly the same. And what you're trying to do here is to understand, in terms of your workforce, you're not going to, for most organizations over 50, which is now what is designated, you're not going to have absolutely no turnover. Things are going to happen in the next 5 years. So, we're trying to establish that if we look at the history, do we have a 3% turnover? So people do leave. And if those people leave, where do we think they're going to leave? Are they going to leave in the biggest portion? So if we have majority of staff in a particular level, where are we beginning to understand where possibly they are going to be making changes? So going back to the beginning to say we've got two options here. One, we can say, no, nothing's going to happen. There are no changes. Nothing's going to work. Or we say, let's look at the history. Let's go forward and go, well, based on what we know, we think this might happen. So that's not to say you will get to 76, but we've now done a projection and we're going, this is what we think. We think we'll have this many terminations. And so we start to unpack a little bit more, remembering we're working on assumptions. We're trying to hazard a very good guess in terms of what's going to happen in 5 years. But if you do it this way, it becomes easier to manage, what has happened and where have we gone wrong. So here you can see if we do a different sort of retention, sorry, the numbers are quite small. I hope everyone can see them. And then we've got different turnovers, so you can change it. So based on changing these things, we can see we've gone from 60, which is our current workforce, to 97. So we're expecting a lot of growth. And what does that look like? So we're expecting 66, I think it says 73. So over the next 5 years, we still expect some terminations because we've got some turnover of staff here, and we've got some, we're expecting additional positions. Okay. And then what's quite important as well is that in terms of your current headcount is to have a look and to say what portion of your workforce is sitting in top management, senior management, so percentage wise. And so what you can start to do is to say, well, if we're going to grow by X percent, or if we're going to decrease by X percent, we can assume that we might decrease proportionately in the various levels. So if you've got a bigger, and it may not be exactly right, in your industry, it might be slightly different. But again, it starts to look and say, well, okay, let's assume based on my current head count, I have 10% in top management. Based on my projection, I might get to 10 people in top management in 2030. I may decide that that is completely wrong. I'm not going to get to that, but at least I've got something, and I don't have to say 10. It just gives me the numbers. And then I think I might have 7 and 17, and so I'm able to start to play with the numbers. What I then do is what I must then do, so we now start to go into our goals, okay? And what I look at is I go, okay, here we go. We've got my KZN. Then I've got my manufacturing. Okay, remembering this is African, colored, and Indian. I've just picked manufacturing for the purpose of this. And I have now got, and I don't know which level this is, but I've now got my African, Indian, colored, and then you've got foreign national, which are obviously not designated, but they're there on the side as well. Okay. So now what I do is I have a look and I say, okay, so if I'm going to go according to sector targets based on a number of 10, if I'm going to reach those sector targets, and what we've done is we've said you can just, I will get to your question now as well, is we could 100%, so remembering this is a collective 49.8%. So I could decide to put everyone in Indian males. The problem with doing it that way, and you can decide to do it that way if you're wanting to slowly make changes, but remember our ultimate goal is EAP. So these sector targets are moving us towards EAP. They're giving us bite-sized chunks to hopefully help us get to that in the long run, whether it be in 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is. That's what these sector targets are attempting to get us to do. Okay, so what this does is it says of this 49%, where is the bigger portion? So if I'm looking at recruiting, I have a position coming up, where should I recruit? So what it then does is it says of this 49%, 44.5% actually is allocated, for lack of a better word, to African male, because from an EAP perspective, they have the biggest chunk. That's not to say that you can't make a goal if you already have. So here we have a look at our snapshot. We already have 5, I think this is African colored Indian male over here. I can elect to leave that 100% the same because here I've got 5 and 1. I can leave it at 5 and 1 over here and still meet my sector targets. Or I can say, well, actually, I think we're going to have a little bit of movement here. So if one of these people leave, I'm going to put it into my African section. And that's to ensure that when you get to 2030, you now don't have an overrepresentation, for example, of Indian males or colored males or females or whatever. So you've still got to, although we're moving towards sector targets, you've still got to consider your EAP. And so that's what this does for you, is it allows you not just to look at this and to blindly just go ahead and say, okay, well, that's what I'm going to do, is it looks for you and it looks and says, this is what you should try and achieve solely on sector targets. Okay, and then it also shows you over here, we exclude white males just because they're not in for sector targets. This is what you should be trying to achieve based on 10 people. Okay, that's what you should be trying to do. If we look at our 5-year projection on EAP alone, then we're going 5 and 1 and 5. So you can see it's a little bit different. And then this section over here says, based on where you currently are, what is your first goal? So if you already had 6 African males, for argument's sake, and your sector, let's say your EAP was 7, it's not going to tell you to reduce to 6. It's going to tell you that you need to try and move to 7, or you can stay the same. And so what it does is it fiddles with the numbers to basically go, if I've already reached my sector targets, so currently I'm already on my sector target in that particular group. What's my next best goal? My next best goal is EAP. So what could I do to reach that? So you don't want to go down to sector target. If you've reached sector target, then you want to move to EAP. And so what you're able to do is to look at all 3 of these things and to go, where do I want to go? So you can see where you are currently, you can see where you want to go, and now you start to be able to put in, and it's actually on the next slide, which I haven't included. So for each section, you can then say, okay, so I'm going to, for the purpose of this, in top management, I don't believe we're going to have any changes. So what I'm going to do is, and let's just remember, so here we're going, for argument's sake, we have 12 people. We actually think we're going to go down to 11. I think this guy's going to leave, and so we're going to go 1 and 4, 5 and 1. Or I actually need to change this and I can't have 5 people here, or let's assume it's over here. I actually need to have more people over here. And so you're able to start to put the numbers in for the end. And then what you do is you can then start to say, okay, I think that that's fine. It allows me to meet my sector targets. It's also ensuring that I don't veer off my EAP. So I'm not just employing all in one group so that in 5 years' time, I now got a bigger problem. It's allowing me to consider both. And so once we've got our goal in place, what we can then do is to say year on year, how do I either go up or down? So if I need to go from 12 people to 5, what do I think is going to happen? So I think I might go 11 and replace one here, 10 and, you know, put it somewhere else. And so year on year, I'm able to then figure out where things are going to go to try and allow me to meet my sector targets. So that's what you then start to do. This tool will allow you to do that, is to look at your projections and then to work that through. Okay. Now, the more important part of this, so this helps you to get to your goal at the end of it. And again, as I said, with the sector targets, it's not really an option. They're telling you that they want you to reach this by 2030. You need to figure out what does that look like for you, and you can use these tools to go, well, how am I going to get there? It's not a thumb suck. Even if your numbers, you're not expecting an increase in headcounts, there's probably going to be people that leave. When those people leave, what are you going to do? So if I've got an oversupply of one group and one person leaves, now just, you know, exacerbating the problem isn't going to be good. Okay. And then the kind of thing which I have shown you guys before, with the kind of thing which highly I would recommend, again, sorry, it's a bit small. So this is the kind of thing that I would recommend that you do, you know, almost monthly or quarterly, depending on the turnover. Okay. I'll get to all the questions shortly. Okay. So what I would suggest that you do, because it's going to be quite difficult, or at least for me. So if we get to, I don't know, the end of the year or the end of 2030 or the end of 2027, and I'm now trying to figure out what did I mean back then, like who did I think was going to go and what was going to happen. And, you know, we thought we were going to have 30 people, but we've actually got 45 now. And it becomes a bit confusing. So what I would suggest, and how you choose to do it is your own thing. But so what is to almost monitor your head count on a monthly or quarterly, depending on how much it changes, is to go, and I would do it per level. So let's, for argument's sake, we've got skill technical here, and I think it says 45. Okay. My sector target, or at least my current percentage based on head count, we can see is 46.7%, whereas my sector target, I think it says, my eyes are terrible, 49 or 48.8. I can now see I've got 51 and 46. So what I can then see over here is I've got my KZN stats. Now, I now need to decide if I move to my projected head count. So I'm not suggesting we work specifically to head count, but you do need to look at it as well, is to go, if I take my African representation here, if I look purely towards 2026 and I look at head count, I'm actually over. But that's not really, you know, it's not a real reflection, because if I look at my 2030, I need 19. So what I'm doing is to go, well, I've actually met that. But if I look at my head count, I expected 35, I've actually got 45. So now my numbers are all over. So I don't need 10 anymore. I possibly need more. So what this does over here is it says, based on my current head count, what do I need to do? If there's a change, what would I need to do to meet my sector target? So if you look here, so in EAP, and what would I need to do to meet my EAP? Okay, so if one person left, my first prize over here would, to meet my sector target, because remember that's prize number 1, would be to increase the designated group of male by 1 person to try and reach my sector target. Okay. I shouldn't really be going for females, because I actually need to reduce, because currently they're a bit over in terms of representation. Okay. My next prize is going, okay, so let's assume I meet that. So now I've got my 1 person here that I need to go. Which is my first prize? So my first prize, because I'm still underrepresented there, if I'm moving towards sector target and EAP. So prize number 1 would be an African male. Prize number 2 would be an Indian male. The white males do come in here, but because of the percentage, it's too low, so they don't really, there's no change there at all. Now, should I be going for a colored male? I shouldn't really. Should I be, okay, so if I don't get that and I get an African female, I'm still under on EAP. It's going to make my sector target go a little bit wonky, but you know, let's see how we go. And so what you're able to start to do here is to have a look at things and almost make an accurate decision to go, not so much I will only employ African male over here, but is to start to go, if I have to employ a colored male for argument's sake, what is my justification? So why am I choosing to continue to exacerbate the problem? And your justification could be, it's a very scarce skill. Nobody else applied. It's in a very remote, I don't know, whatever your reasons are. But you've now given it an actual thought. You've made a decision, a conscious decision to do something which then affects these numbers, as opposed to historically what we do is we do the recruitment, we find the person, we come to the plan afterwards and we go, oh no, I've now employed the wrong, but you know what? They were the best person for the job. And they very, very well have been. But my question is saying, had we thought about it, had we considered it, yes, they may still have been the best person, but they could have been someone else. Okay. And this is something that you can start to do, which then allows you, when you get to the end of your plan, is to identify if there's movement. So if an African male leaves, this thing will change to go, well, where should we be going? So it's now going to change it. These numbers change, and it allows you to work with your head count as well as the percentages, because if your head count changes, where are we going? If someone leaves that wasn't somebody that you planned was going to leave, so according to your plan, where are we going to replace? So now you're able to identify what you said you were going to do in your plan versus what has happened in reality. And so when you get to your justifications, you're now in a far better place as opposed to down there trying to figure out, oh, what happened? Okay, so these are the kinds of things. So the plan is great. Putting it in place is amazing. But in my view, the monitoring and the proactive management of this becomes far more important. It's what are we going to do now? We can't put this in place and wait till next year to September to now speak to whoever's done recruitment and go, oh, guys, why did you, I mean, where are the CVs? Like what is happening? If you proactively manage this and you give people information in which we go, you can employ who you like. So you employ the best person for the job. They must have skills and experience, etc. But what I want you to consider, this is what our plan looks like. The same as you wouldn't employ someone as a bus driver if they didn't have a PDP license. This just becomes another factor to consider. So I've got 5 great people. One is this, one is that, one is this, one is that. Who do we want to pick? Well, first prize is ideally we want that. Okay, there isn't anybody like that. Okay, where's the next prize? And so now you're consciously starting to decide where are you going to go, as opposed to, like I said, the after, deciding on it afterwards. Now, in terms of, sorry, the deviations and the justifications, there are deviations, so it's actually listed in the EA2. So when we do year 1, you will have your 7 reasons in terms of identifying why are we deviating from our targets. Again, make it a monthly thing. Identify if someone has deviated, especially if they've deviated in a group that you're already overrepresented in. Why did we decide to do that? Okay, and so what we do is we now say it could have been there was no recruitment, there wasn't any promotion. This one over here is like a stock standard, everybody uses it. My suggestion is to make it almost a rule in the organization, is to say if you're a recruitment manager or a line manager who's coming to recruit someone, again, I'm going to go with specifically in places where we're massively overrepresented, you need to tell me, we need to almost make a decision to say, yes, we are going to do this, and we're going to do it for this and this and this reason. Otherwise, you're just going to continue to go down the same path, and then you get to the end and you're nowhere closer to where you need to be. So these are the 7 different reasons that you can excuse me, you can say why you had justifications. If they come and do an audit, they are going to come and do an audit, and possibly, so this will be in terms of your justifications and your compliance certificate. You will then say, these are the things why I've done whatever I've done. You get your compliance certificate. They assume right at the beginning, they believe what you've said, assuming you answer it all correct on the system, and you get your certificate. Okay. If they come and do an audit, they can take away your certificate, which for businesses doing work with government, and or if you possibly going to need it, I've said this before, for your BEE certificate, I think they're not going to only take into account your acknowledgements of submission, but will possibly also say, I want your compliance certificate now. I don't know that for certain, but it makes logical sense that at some point they're going to do that. Okay. Alrighty. So I'm going to get to the questions now, but some of the things that I would highly recommend is, you need to start using tools like these to start to align your workforce planning. So where are we going? When we do recruitment, do they know where we over and under and that kind of thing? It's the same as looking at, a skills audit. If we continue just to employ people with the wrong kinds of skills, you would be saying to your line managers, no, we actually need people who have this and this and this type of skills. We're happily able to do that. We wouldn't continue to go down a road that's going to be detrimental for the business. The same thing applies here. It is just one other factor to try and help you to get to where you need to go. Then there's things like conducting regular internal audits. So making sure, are the processes that you've put in place still continuing? Are the line managers doing what you need to do? Is it being signed off as it should be? Putting the KPIs for equity into the manager's scorecards. Now, if you're going to do that, my suggestion is that you do some proper training to make sure that people are not now going to go the wrong way, which is just to, oh, well, fine, I'm just going to employ based on race and gender, for argument's sake. I don't care if they've got the skills, which is not, if you want to do it properly, it's not just about that. You need to take it. So on a scorecard, when I'm employing someone, race and gender and my equity needs to be, it needs to be, excuse me, it needs to be one of the factors. Okay. Then there's things like developing talent pipelines. So there's a lot of issues where we'll say we don't have women because women don't go into those fields, or, we don't have skilled things. So you can start to put things in place where you can have internal trainings, which create a pool of available candidates if promotion comes up afterwards and that sort of thing. So start to think creatively about, we're here, we want to be there, we want to move people up, what are we going to do? Okay. And then again, drive accountability through management forums. This is not just something that the HR person can do. It's not just something that sits with the EE manager. You need to start to implement process through like your promotions, your upskilling. And again, I'm not suggesting that if you're going to do training, you only train designated groups. Training should be available for everybody. But again, when we're doing training, is we start to identify, if I've got one particular group that I always train, and they are now the people that are going to go up in the pipeline, for argument's sake, is that going to create an overrepresentation at some point? So if I focus all my training on females for the next 5 years, I'm then going to have a complete overrepresentation of females. So I also need to be thinking about the long-term sort of things, is to go, I can't just now throw all my eggs in one basket and then I'm left here. The same as when I said with the sector targets and the EAP. Don't just go, oh, okay, well, it's easy. I'm just going to plonk my 35% into one particular group, because you've still got your EAP. So now what you've done is you've fixed the one problem, but you've now made a massive problem because you've promoted a whole lot of people into the one group. When we get new sector targets for 2035, you're still going to have to be moving towards EAP anyway. So yeah, this is not just about today or tomorrow, or we've got to think about the long-term plan, and that's what these strategic things are asking you to do. Is this is not just a document. I would suggest it becomes part of the strategy of the business. All right, so I've sorry, this is a slide again. Okay, so I'm going to get into the questions now. As I said, okay, so let me just go to the chat very quickly. So the kinds of things that we can help you with, hold on, there's quite a lot of questions, hold on. Okay, so we can help you with all of these things. As I said, that tool that I showed you earlier, there's a free version available. So if you're wanting to have a look at your sector targets, have a look at your projections or whatever, we will send you, when we send an email afterwards, we will send you a link to that. I do also have a training, which if people are unclear, not specifically on the plan, but more on the report. So if you're interested in that, we'll send you the link as well. But you're more than welcome to consult. We can help you with all of these things. Okay. So I will send you everything, or at least Charlene or whoever will send it to you all afterwards. And then you can message us. All right. Okay. So let me. All right. So we've then got a question, which I think I've answered already. So if your current plan is ending on the 30th of September 2025, you need to put your new plan in place for 1st of September 2025. You cannot put it, you can't make it start 1st of October. Everything now runs 1st of September to 30th of August. Okay, even if your current plan extended past that, we're now starting on year 0, which everybody starts on the 1st of September. Okay. I've answered the disabled white men from the designated groups. So anybody who's disabled, that is all groups with exception of foreign national, everybody, African, Indian, colored, white, all men, etc., they all form part of the designated groups. Okay, but like I said before, please check the definition on the EEA1 of people with disabilities. The disability has to have an impactful difference in the workplace. So you can't say, if it doesn't if it doesn't make a difference, you can't say it's a disability. If it has no impact on my ability to get promotions, get a job there, do training, etc., etc., then is it really a disability? Okay. So, and there isn't a list of disabilities. It is specific to your workplace. Okay. You don't need a medical report to prove the disability. It's just the EEA1. I would suggest, though, if you're unclear, so if it's a disability that you can't specifically, I don't know, see for argument's sake, you can maybe request it, but there's nothing in the employment equity legislation that says that you have to get it. I know that for BE, they do require certificates, but it's not specifically required for equity. Just be careful, though, again, as I say, is having now a whole lot of people that weren't disabled before suddenly now disabled, but there doesn't appear to be any sort of negative, there's no negative impact on them because they have whatever it is that they have. Okay. Alrighty. Okay, next question. We need to have our 5-year plan based on projections now in 2025 already. Yes. If I projected an increase in staff, but in 2 years we're actually scaling down. So my understanding as it is, okay, and this hasn't been made 100% clear, is that your plan, what you put in place now for 2030 remains as is. Okay, so if you had planned, let's say 100 people, but unfortunately you've downscaled to 80, you in, let's say, 2 years, you will then really have a deviation for the remainder of your plan. So your deviation is going to be, I'll just go back to that slide, your deviation is going to be something like your business economic circumstances. So you will have a deviation because of yeah, it's gone down. The same as if your numbers have gone up. So my expectation is that most year everyone's going to have deviations. There's going to be some deviation. And that's why I'm saying with the deviations, I'm not entirely clear because we have to do both numbers and percentages. When they're talking about a deviation, from my perspective, headcount doesn't make any sense. It should be based on percentages because if I downscale, but I still meet the sector target, have I deviated? Well, in my mind, I haven't deviated. If I go from 100 to 200 and I still meet my sector target because I've employed in the right places, I haven't deviated because my head count is just a number. The percentages are, in my view, what actually makes the difference. how that is reported when we do the report in 2026, I'm not sure where they're going to identify the deviations. Is it on head count? You said you were going to have 5, you've only got 3, or is it going to be you said you were going to have 20%, you've only got 10 or whatever. So just bear that in mind when you're looking at it. I'm not entirely sure. So you look at it on both perspectives, which is why from here you look at both the head counts. Okay, fine. I'm fine on my head count. I said I was going to have 10. I actually have 16. What is my deviation? I've got more people than I expected. But over here, my sector target, I'm not where I need to be. So I've deviated on both. One is positive, one is not positive. Where am I going with this thing? Okay. Alrighty. No, okay, Vanessa, if you have less than 50 people, you no longer need to do any of this equity stuff. You do not need to deregister. You can log on and you will get you can still do your compliance certificate via the system, but you don't deregister as you did before. Okay. Spoken about the plan being cast in stone. I have heard that they might change sector targets during the time, but that hasn't been said anywhere. It just is one of those things where they say, well, the Director General could change the sector targets. I don't know if it's going to happen, but currently, once your plan is in place, that is kind of your plan. Okay. Let me have a look. All right, what are the penalties if the plan is not signed off on the 31st of August? That remains the same as it has always been, which is if you look at I think it's the Schedule 1. The Schedule 1 talks about the fines, depending on which section of the Act you have transgressed. So I think it's the second portion which talks about the plan, which says that you must have an active plan or signed plan before the other one expires. And there it talks about, for the first instance, I think it's, forgive me, I could be wrong, but I think it's like 1.5 million or 2% of turnover. But again, they're going to come and audit you. If you don't have the plan, I don't know if they're going to audit you on the 1st of September. I'm not entirely sure. And if you had, but the legislation saying you should have it by the 31st of August. So I would desperately try and get it done. But if you can't get it done, maybe you can give me a shout afterwards. I'm not sure what they will do, but you're supposed to have one in place by the 1st of September, with the fines being the one up to 1.5 or 2% of turnover. Okay. The formula to calculate the 2030, you can click on the link and go and have a look there. You can have a look there. Can the plan be for less than 5 years? No. The plan goes from 1st of September 2025 to 31st of August 2030. If during that time if during the time of the 5 years you become non-designated, you would then log on and you would then declare that you are now under 50, and it would then become irrelevant. Okay, I see that Charlene has put the link in there for the training. I don't have the link right now, but we will share the link for the projections and that kind of thing, which you can go and use. Alternatively, if you need additional help, you can reach out. But just some key takeaways, just make sure. So for me, make sure that you're doing, a more strategic sort of a look at this. Don't make it reactive. Don't get to the end of it. Don't get to the end of it and then go, oh my goodness, we didn't meet our plans. Okay, so I'm uncertain if the company had an EE plan before I joined. Can we be fined for this? Yes, you can. Luckily, it's the 20th of August. So whether they had, okay, so in terms of history, so prior to the 1st of September, they can still come and do an audit and check that you are compliant for plans and whatever. So you can still be fined going backwards. If there's no plan in place, then 100% that they can fine you. If you didn't have your meetings, if they don't, they're not going to be checking the plan in terms of progress, because we've now got new progress. But if they didn't like your plan, or they didn't have the things that it needed, etc., if your minutes weren't correct, if you didn't have meetings, they can still do audits. Okay. So sorry, I've gone really, really fast. I'm hoping everybody got everything that they needed. Please reach out if you have any assistance, if you need anything. I will send you the link to that tool that you can use, which will help you with your targets to make it a little bit more scientific. And then, who is required to submit? It's anyone who has more than 50 staff, or if you are designated by collective agreement, or if you a government entity. So if you have more than 50 employees, then you need to do that. Okay. Alrighty. That brings me to the end of the webinar. I do hope you enjoyed it. Please feel free. It will be probably loaded on YouTube. Danae, you have a question?
Apologies, I actually
Danielle, I
wanted
have
to
unmuted.
react and thank you
Okay.
for the informative presentation. Yes.
Sure, no problem. Okay. Alrighty. Good luck, everybody. And we will hopefully hear from you. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.